Hey everyone, I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold here with our weekly lecture series, Great Players of the Present. This is one of our younger players, Abhimanyu Mishra. And I want to thank our sponsor, Brandon Haynes, for sponsoring the lecture. Abhi's the youngest Grandmaster of all time. And just recently, in the last few months, he became the youngest person to ever beat a reigning world champion in a slow game. And we're going to look at that game during the lecture. We've been under the weather at our house today. Archer was sick, and I took him to, the doctors, and I've been sick. But I'm not sick enough to not do the lecture. Although I may have more facial tics than usual, so that's funny. I've known Abhi for a long time. I played him a few years ago when I was higher rated than him, and we drew. That's the only time we played. He was born in 2009. Truth hurts. Youngest Grandmaster ever, 12 years, 4 months, 25 days. That's pretty impressive. It used to be the youngest Grandmasters of all time were 15, and then it was 14, and then 13, and then 12. And then I don't know if anybody's going to beat this record soon. 12 is pretty young to be a Grandmaster. He was taught by his father. Whenever I saw Mishra at tournaments, his dad was with him. He's the youngest player ever to achieve a USCF rating of 2,000 at the age of 7. And my dogs can't believe it. Yet breaking the result previously held by a Wonder Liang. And what's funny is, I always confuse those two because they're similar age and similar rating. But a Wonder is a little older. But yeah, they're both like two of the most talented juniors in the US, if not the two most talented. And hopefully Andy Woodward isn't watching this lecture getting mad at me. Because I'm a big Andy Woodward fan. And he's going to play Tata Steel in the A group next year. So America has a lot of good talent. And Mishra's still the youngest Grandmaster of all time. Then Wikipedia has a very short article on Mishra, especially since he's the youngest Grandmaster ever. I think there should be more information. They talk about him winning the 2023 U.S. Junior Championship. In the U.S. Championship, it says he tied for second place with 6.5 out of 11. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, so sometimes I complain about the Wikipedia article not being very in-depth. And I think for somebody who's the youngest Grandmaster ever and who just beat the reigning world champion, there should be a longer Wikipedia article. So anyway, you can read it on your own and get some information about Abhi. Abhi's going to get a lot better over the next 10 years, and he's one of the front runners to become one of the top 10 players in the world, since he's one of the top 100 players in the world now, and he just turned 17 this month. In fact, about 10 days ago, he turned 17. I don't know how old he was when I played him. I want to say 11, because he became a Grandmaster at 12, and I was higher rated than him when I played him. So he was either 10 or 11. I don't think he was 9. So I'm going to go with 10 or 11. He definitely wasn't 12, because I think when he was 12, he was higher rated than me. Okay, now let's get to the good part of the lecture, the games. Okay, so I wanted to show a different kind of games. Like, I'm definitely going to show the Gukesh game because he beat the world champion. So, seems like a good game to show. And I wanted to show a game when he was very young. So, this game was played in 2019. And let's see, this is 2026. So, he was either 9 or 10, depending on what month it was. And he's playing a fellow Michigander like me, Seth Homa. Or is it Michiganian? I should know, I'm from Michigan. And I've played Seth Homa 1 billion times. Seth is an FM or an IM, depending on what month it is. I think he's an FM, but he's been trying to get IM norms. And when this game was played in 2019, Mishra's rating was 2227 FIDE. That sounds like he was either 9 or 10 years old. And Seth Homa was 2300. So usually when I look at a game with a kid, I don't look at games they played years ago, because years ago they weren't so good. But Abhi's been a well-known player in the US since he was about 9. People knew he was going to get really good. Sort of like a wonder. Okay, now, typically, I said typically because, then the opposite will happen when I show a game. Abhi likes to play strategical, what a lot of people call old man chess. Very positional style, especially for somebody so young. Okay, so they played sort of a boring opening. H3 is pretty slow. I played this with black also. I don't think I play knight BD7. I think in this position, I play C5. I think I played that against Shankland, and I drew several years ago in Michigan. Okay, so knight BD7, it's a more solid move. And we get this sort of boring position. It's about equal. I guess you could argue white's better, but I wouldn't argue that. I like black's fianchettoed bishops more than white's bishops. Okay, and so white doesn't want to lose the bishop pair. So he plays bishop E1, rook C8. Okay, and now, if I remember correctly, Seth made a tactical blunder here, which loses the game. Although it could be that I'm wrong and he made it the next move after this one. I think he made it this move. Yeah, rook C2. White wasn't suspecting anything. This doesn't look like a position where there's a lot of tactics. And obviously, white wants to double rooks on the C file and fight for the C file. But this is a tactical mistake because black has a fork, which is a piece sacrifice, and the queen on B3, which heretofore could have gone to C2 or D1, can't go to C2 or D1 because the rook is on C2. And typically against strong players, the way they beat you is they play strategically and positionally and with a lot of opening knowledge. And then when you least expect it, there's a tactical move that you missed, but they don't miss it. And then they're winning. And white let his guard down because it looks like a boring position where there's not going to be any threats. Okay, so Abi plays knight c5, forking the queen and the bishop, and it's a piece sack, but Abi has 2 knights, 1 for each of you. So when you take 1 knight, another knight replaces it. Obviously, if white's rook wasn't on c2 and was on c1, which is where it was, then white could play queen c2 or queen d1, and what black did is silly. But since the rook's on c2, white's just losing material. And white not only loses a pawn, which is the final tally, black won a pawn from that tactical sequence, black also has the 2 bishops, and that's one of white's most important pawns, the pawn on d4. Because now black has a big center, black can play e5, and white has not only no compensation, I would say black is better anyway. Black has this tremendous knight on d3. Okay, so rook d1, attacking the knight. Black gets 2 bishops against 2 knights. And then Abi very slowly increases his advantage, very patient, which is unusual for a 9-year-old. But that's the way he plays. He doesn't play in a hurry. Wants to trade queens. White says no. And I mean, white's just lost here, but black has to have some technique. Abi repeats, because always repeat. Black doesn't do very much. Black's not in a hurry, which again is unusual for a little kid. Okay, and eventually, Abi finds the plan of pushing the pawns in the center and increasing his space advantage. Now, by playing bishop f6 earlier, basically forcing g3, that opens up white's king on the white squares. So Abi wants to get rid of his pawn on d5, so he can play something like queen c6 and give checkmate. So he wants to play d4. So first, he makes white play h4 g3, then he plays e5 d4 when the white king is much more exposed. Okay, and b3 is played, which just loses material. But the other option is to move your knight from c3. I don't have any good suggestions. I'm going to say a2, since I don't see another square. And then black could play, as I said, queen c6 and play for mate. Or you could be greedy and play bishop e4. And, win some material. So white decided to lose material a different way. And black has 2 bishops and a passed pawn for the rook. That's way too much. Now, if I was black here, I would be thinking about checkmating white. But Abi's like, I'm ahead material. My passed pawn's on the 6th rank. Let's just trade queens, and then I'll promote my c pawn. Truth hurts. Now, in this position, if white trades queens, black just plays c2, bishop b2. Black's going to win that rook for the c pawn. If white gets greedy and takes the b pawn, then queen h1 check and bishop e3 check, f3 check is annoying. I don't really have a suggestion for a good move for white. And Seth agreed, and Seth resigned in this position. So that game was like black equalized out of the opening, then white blundered to a tactical trick, and then Abi's technique was really good. I think black played that game like a grandmaster, but he was only 9 or 10 years old. And he beat a solid Seth Homa, who basically for the last 10 years has been trying to get an IM title. And it's possible Seth did get all of his IM norms and he's an IM now. That's my recollection. I used to give chess lessons to Seth back in Michigan a long time ago. Seth has beaten his fair share of grandmasters, but this game he didn't look very good. So you can see from a very young age, very mature play from Abi. Okay, let me flip the board. This game was played in the London Chess Classic. He's playing Benjamin Martin. I don't know who that is. And this game, black wanted to play super sharp and tactical and crazy, and Abi just beat him to a pulp. So black did something this game in the Dragon that's a relatively new idea. And this game was played last year when Abi was already been a grandmaster for years. They played a Dragon Sicilian, and in this position, black played h5, which is a new idea. We're stopping white from playing g4. And also, we're stopping white from playing h4, h5, because that's illegal. So a lot of times in the Dragon, black does play h5, but usually it's like move 12 or 13, not move 6 or 7. Okay, so Abi develops, and they play a typical Yugoslav attack, except black's played h5. It's weird. And in this position, for most people, Abi took, showing how strong he is, he took the knight in a way that would be the third choice for most people. Most people would probably take with the knight. Some people like their knight on d4, so they take with the a pawn. But Abi plays c takes b3, which actually often is correct. In Sicilians, if you castle queenside and take with the c pawn on b3, when they take your bishop, your king on b1 and a1 is really safe. And you guys can fight for the c file. Black can play rook c8, white can play rook c1. But if black is pushing his queenside pawns, white has a lot of queenside pawns. So he takes with his c pawn, which I think generally is good. Okay, a6. Okay, always play king b1, b5. Plays rook e1, not trying to checkmate black yet, but opposing the rook against the king. So black's like, okay, I'll castle. And then Abi plays bishop h6, getting rid of the Finegold bishop, the dragon bishop. Then he takes. If black takes the knight as a Zwischenzug, then queen h6 is annoying. Threatening queen h8 mate. So I assume black would play knight h7, because I don't see another move that stops queen h8 mate. Then I can just take the rook and white's up material. So he took back on g7, knight d5, and Abi plays in positional style, attacking the b pawn. Knight takes, pawn takes. Now the rook is well placed on the e file. Rook e8. Abi says, thanks for the pawn. Black sacrificed the pawn to open up the files on the queen side, which didn't really work. Then g4. The point of h5 was to stop g4, but g4 is a good move now, opening up black's king. h4, trying to keep the king side blocked. Rook e4, black attacks. b4, keeping the queen side closed. a3, and now g5. Abi ignores his opponent's attack, which doesn't really exist, and Abi's going to play rook takes h4, and so forth. And you can't stop white's rook from going to h4. You can play h3 so you don't lose your pawn, but the rook's still going to h4, and then when I move my knight, like knight c6 attacking the queen, then I unleash my queen. So white has a big attack against black's king, which makes sense since black's dragon bishop is gone, black's knight is gone from f6. Okay, black took, getting his attack going. White took. That's sort of the end of black's attack. Black doesn't really have any way to continue. Queen b6. The game ended quickly. Knight e6, threatening queen g7 mate and queen h8 mate. Black's position is so bad, he had to break my most important rule. Never play f6. If you don't play f6, I think you get mated in one, unless you play queen d4. Also not good. Takes on f6. Bishop takes knight. f7 check is a nice Zwischenzug. If you take with the bishop, queen h8's mate. If you don't like that, rook h8's mate. So you can't take with the bishop, so you have to take with the king. Then rook check. And again, white has two checkmates, queen g7 mate and queen h8 mate. Abi played the one that took less energy, queen g7 mate. So I like the way white didn't play for an attack. White developed his pieces, played king b1, put his rook on h1 in the middle. And then when black's attack was gone and white had an extra pawn, then Abi played for the attack with g4 and eventually did a rook lift and checkmated his opponent pretty easily. Abi, in that game, obviously outclassed his opponent. That's why we haven't heard of his opponent. A lot of times I'll show a game played 150 years ago, and white is somebody famous, like Morphy or Steinitz, Lasker, and black is some name, and you're like, who's that? And the reason you don't know who it is shown during the game, when they get completely crushed. If they didn't get completely crushed every game, they'd be famous. But if they're going to get completely crushed, right, you don't see the best players in the world having black in this position. That's why you haven't heard of the guy with black. Okay, now, I had to make an executive decision. Let me flip the board. Because if I show games Abi beat Seth, Homa, and Benjamin Martin, you guys are like, wait a minute, Abi's not that good. You're just showing games where he beats guys rated 2100, 2200. I want to see Abi against the world champions. Rawr. Okay, that's fine. So the last two games are going to be against two of the best players in the world. This game was played last year, also in the London Chess Classic. Firouzja's white and Mishra's black. So you can't complain about getting paired with Firouzja, because that's when you're a young player, you want to play the best players in the world. And a lot of times, if you're playing in like US Open tournaments, like the people who are watching this video, you play 1500 and 1200 and 1800. And if you're Mishra you want to play the top 10 players in the world, and Mishra is not the top 10 players in the world. So how do you do it? So typically you go to Europe, or you play some tournament in St. Louis where they let American 2,600 players, 2,700 players play the best players in the world. If St. Louis Chess Club didn't exist, the truth would hurt. Sorry, my mouth is dry. Like Marco Rubio here. Okay, so Mishra's black against Firouzja. Firouzja 27-62 FIDE. God damn. Now, a lot of people, I'm not going to argue with them. They say, if you're playing Firouzja, Firouzja likes rock'em, sock'em chess, complicated, theoretical, tactical. So you shouldn't play that way. You should play boring, and then Firouzja doesn't like that. Okay, Mishra's like, I'm 16 years old. I can calculate with anybody. And you don't get to be one of the best players in the world by not being overconfident. So if you, who's watching the video, is playing Firouzja, you're probably expecting to lose. And you're like, Firouzja, he's 2,700 and I'm 1,200. He's going to crush me. Why am I playing Firouzja? And if you're Mishra, you're like, Firouzja, finally I'm going to beat somebody in the top 5 in the world. That's how the top players think, that they're going to win, they're going to play well, and they're going to have a good result. And if you don't think like that, then you're not going to do it. So Mishra plays the Najdorf. Roar. The sharpest of chess openings. Okay, H3 is one of the 10 moves that white plays against the Najdorf. Basically every legal move. E5 attacking the knight. The point of the Najdorf is white can't do anything on B5. So white moves his knight away. F4, very aggressive. B5, also aggressive. Queen F3. G4. As I said, Firouzja likes to play super aggressive. Rook C8. Queen G2. Probably expecting knight D4, which would attack the queen. So he moves the queen away. Put it in H. Black waits for white to play bishop E3 before he takes on F4, so white has to lose a tempo. White had to move the bishop and then move it again. Knight E7 is an unusual move. Typically the knight goes to E5. I guess black wants to play knight G6. And then he sacks the exchange. Now, you may ask, why did black sack the exchange? And the answer is, always sack the exchange. That ruins white's king position permanently and gives black a long-lasting attack. Notice, black isn't playing solid and passive because his opponent's a well-known player. He's playing the move he thinks is the best. Rook takes D6. Zwischen Zug. Queen C8. Knight G6. Threatening the bishop and the rook. Bishop H2. Sacking the exchange back. Now black's king looks terrible. That's why Firouzja sacked the exchange back to stop black from castling. Takes on C3. And magically, material's equal. You could argue whose king is safer. Obviously, black's king isn't very good on E8. Also, black's rook isn't very good. And white has the 2 bishops. So I can see why Firouzja sacked the exchange back. 2 bishops, safer king, better rook. queen d2, trading queens. Black says, okay, we'll trade queens. And now he plays king d7 now that the queens are off. Then he plays king to e7, which is probably not a move I would consider. I'd probably play rook c8 without thinking. King b2, h5. White still has the two bishops. Black dominates e5. White could play knight f5, and white does. Knight f5, one of my emotes. King f8. Abhi makes his knights better. Kicks the knight out of f5. Takes this knight, confusing the audience. And black played bishop takes a2. Black's up a pawn. Rook h3, attacking the knight. And the idea is to play rook a3 when the knight moves away, getting his pawn back. Knight g4, and the players agreed to a draw. And a lot of times when I do a lecture on a great player of the present or great player of the past, I just show games they win. But I wanted to show a game Mishra drew with black against Firouzja because that's a very good result. Mishra is not one of the top 10 players in the world, but he will be. But when he plays top 10 players in the world with the black pieces, has a complicated knight orf, ends up not castling, and draws anyway, that's an excellent result. Maybe black could have played on, but probably Mishra was thinking bishop takes knight, rook a3, and we have opposite colored bishops with even pawns. So it looks like a draw. Nobody's going to queen anything. Nobody's getting mated. So a draw is a fair result. What's that say? Okay. So that was a very complicated game that would take a long time to analyze properly all the variations. And Mishra held his own with Firouzja, which is very impressive. That's the kind of game I would expect Firouzja to beat almost anybody. Okay, and to finish the lecture, Mishra's most famous win, which was last year in the FIDE Grand Swiss against world champion Damaraju Gukesh. And I remember when this game was played. So Abhi has white. Gukesh didn't have the best tournament. And they played Italian game. Very solid. White played bishop g5, which is an aggressive move because sometimes black plays h6, g5 and starts a kingside attack. Okay, Gukesh played a6. That way his bishop has an escape square and he's waiting. He wants to see if white castles. He wants to decide if he should play g5 or if he should wait. You don't want to play g5 before white castles because attacking with your g and h pawns doesn't make sense if white's king's not on g1. White did castle. d6, c3. The bishop retreats. And g5. Okay, so now the question is, should black ignore castling and just push his kingside pawns? h5, h4, g4. Or should black castle queenside and then play h5, g4, h4? Or should black castle kingside and just play with his pawn on g5 and not play for a kingside attack? Okay, Gukesh is the world champion. He plays knight h7. That defends his g-pawn, so he can play h5. Also prepares to play f5 later. d4, if black is going to attack on the king side, white wants to play in the center, making kingside play less palatable. h5, put it in h. Now black wants to play h4. The world champion is attacking. Takes on e5. g4, a Zwischenzug, not taking back on e5. You can't really take back on e5 because I got two pieces attacking it. So I could take with the bishop or the knight. You could play h4. In a blitz game, that's the move that I would play. I'm not sure what white does here. I don't like to cheat and use the engine. Let people on YouTube do that. I definitely play h4 in a blitz game. I might lose. I guess white could take all the pawns. That doesn't seem good for white, though. Take. It doesn't seem like white has enough compensation for a piece. Okay, I'm going to cheat and use the engine, which I never do, since I have no idea what the answer is. Let's see. The engine might just say black's winning. Both players are crazy. Oh, wow, I can't see that far ahead. Okay, so the engine says knight takes h4 and queen h5. Yeah, I didn't see that. Threatening mate. And then if you stop mate, which is probably a good idea, then bishop takes h4. Man, this is annoying. And white has really good compensation for a piece. It could be that this has been played before and the players knew it. Okay, so Gukesh played g4. It's a good thing I look because I never would have found knight h4, queen h5. Takes, sacrificing his knight on f3. Gukesh takes. Takes on c7. Hey, white's playing the way I was going to play, but he played it better. Queen e7. Knight takes f3. So white has a lot of pawns for a piece, and black's king doesn't have a safe place to go, and white's pawn on c7 is very annoying. So I like white in this position. Usually, I like a piece better than pawns, but not here. That pawn on c7 is so good. Okay, bishop g4. Bishop d6. White plays e5, cementing his bishop. King d7 is a funny move because it walks into discovered check, but the bishop doesn't have a good discovered check. And if you move the bishop, you lose your c-pawn. And black's king can't castle either way, so what he wants to do is play a move like rook g8 or rook e8 and then play king c8. Then he gets his rooks active and gets his king safe. Okay, Abi plays knight d4, attacking Gukesh's queen. They trade. Now, white's threatening d5, so queen d5. Queen takes h5, another pawn. Knight f6, confusing the audience. Queen check. They trade queens. Pawn takes doesn't win a piece because of king takes. So white just plays f4. So black's a piece ahead, but white just has so many pawns. White has 8 pawns, which I didn't realize until now. White still has all of his pawns. And black has 3 pawns. 5 pawns is too much for a piece, but maybe Gukesh can win some of them. Knight d5, f5, getting more passed pawns. Rook check, rook f1. White still has his passed pawn in the 7th rank. White's got 4 passed pawns on the right side of the board, include c7. Double up on the bubble up. Black wins one of the pawns. Abhi still has 3 pawns for a piece. And bishop d4 is an annoying move because this pawn's hanging. After bishop d4, the pawn's defended, and more importantly, white's threatening rook d6 mate. So black's king is still in trouble. White's pieces are all over it. We have to stop rook d6 mate. He plays rook f3 check, knight d3 check, and then takes on e5. That stops mate, but it loses a piece. And now we have a skewer, and white's 2 pawns up. If black's not going to win any more pawns, this pawn's protected, and g5 protects this pawn, or rook d4. So black's in a lot of trouble here. Abhi repeats, always repeat. Gives away his b pawn. Pushes his g pawn. Wants to go into the winning rook endgame. Black doesn't want to trade. White was threatening rook d8. So rook h8. 2 passed pawns, 1 for each of you. Now you get this passed pawn in the 7th rank. And after king b3, Gukesh resigned because next move is going to be rook f8. Rook f8's annoying because I'm going to play g8 queen. If you play rook g8, I can play rook f8, and if you take, then I queen this pawn. And 2 rooks easily beat 1 rook. I mean, easy if you're a grandmaster. If you're 1200, I wouldn't resign a rook against 2 rooks. If I was playing another grandmaster, then I'd resign because down a rook. Truth hurts. So 2 passed pawns, 1 for each of you. So that game reminded me of the Firouzja game because Abhi played very complex, sacrificial, interesting chess and ended up beating the world champion. Great tournament for Abhi, not a good tournament for Gukesh. The truth hurts. Sometimes you have bad tournaments. So Abhi can play positional chess and grind you down, or he can outcalculate you, or he can play where the position's a complete mess and still play well. That's why he's the youngest grandmaster ever. He has a universal style. He doesn't just play one way. And he plays a lot of different openings, so you can't just prepare one opening for him. So it'll be interesting to see if he ever fights in the candidates of the World Championship. I definitely think he'll be top 10, although it might be 3 or 4 years away. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that lecture on great players of the present, Abhimanyu Mishra, or as we call him, Abhi. I want to thank our sponsor again, Brandon Haynes. If you want to sponsor a lecture, contact my wife, Karen. Her details are in the description, and you can sponsor a lecture on whatever topic you find interesting. I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold. Hopefully I wasn't too sick that lecture and you guys could understand me. I'll see you guys next time with more great players of the present. Bye.